Well, what a waste of beer first. Yes,
Indeed.
it is a waste of beer. Unfortunately, I am not smiling. I am very disappointed. And of course, the lack of organisation, the lack of energy in the England side today was very apparent. Top quality players not being able to perform to the best is big worry. We saw it in the second half against Serbia. We've seen it almost through the entire game today, where Denmark's tactics really outweighed England's tactics. And while we might have a better quality of player in terms of all round, in terms of the team we picked, certainly Denmark as a team played much better than England did. And that was really down to the fact that Denmark pressed England. They pressed and pressed and pressed, forced them into basic errors. England, in the same position when Denmark had the ball, stood off them, allowed them to play through them. And of course, I think they find themselves extremely lucky this evening that it's a 1-1. It's a point. We can't keep coming back and saying, for me, well, it's a good point. You know, we can move on. They've just got to get better. Gareth has to pick the right team. He has to look at the team in the two games they've got. He has to look at the squad, and he has to look at the system and say, I have to change something. I have to be I personally think, quite dramatic and say, this is our tactics, this is who's going to play, this is the way we're going to play in the next game, and give a little bit of spirit and hope for the fans who are obviously out there supporting the team and throughout the country, a little bit more hope, because at the moment, if we come across a Spain, you know, we come across a France, you know, I can't see us doing the job. I can't see us winning the game, you know. No. So, you know, the teams we've just played are lower down in the rankings in the international scene, and we've struggled.
Sam, as you say, on paper, and indeed I think we're the favourites according to the bookmakers going into this tournament, on paper this is a team of absolutely star players. What would you do differently? What's Gareth Southgate getting wrong, Sam?
Well, personally, I'd point out in no uncertain circumstances, you know, what's going wrong. I mean, you know, I would sit the players down and say, you know, what are you playing at? You know, what are you doing? Why are you underperforming? Why are you underperforming? Why aren't you hitting the top of your level that you hit with England sides in the past and with your club side? And I think that you really need to nail them down. It's time to not be too nice. It's time to show your aggression as a manager. It's time to really nail the players down, to give them you know, if you were like a kick up the backside and say, this is an underperformance. You need to get where you should be, and you need to get there right now. And you need to give ourselves a chance to go forward and win this tournament. And we need to keep the hope up for the English fans. He's going to face a huge amount of criticism, both the players and the manager, after this performance. Now use that criticism as a basis of getting a positive attitude and going out and proving everybody wrong in the next game.
I mean, I appreciate what you're saying about the players, and certainly when you do sort of mark them out of 10, you know, nobody's at the high end of that scale. But at the same time, it's about the manager, isn't it? It's about where he's playing players. You know, players are being played out of position. The players themselves don't seem to be gelling as a team. How do you sort that, Sam? Because it is difficult, isn't it, bringing a group of players together after a pretty long and gruelling season with the Premier League, to then get them all playing together and having that chemistry. How do you do it? Because it seems to me that Southgate isn't really inspiring them to be their best.
Well, there's many factors. Obviously, fatigue is a big factor. Mental fatigue as well as physical fatigue. So it comes down. It's not really about the training. It's about the tactics and about getting the players ready physically and mentally, because they've had such a long season. There's not really that need to train them that much. It's all really about the system and about how they should play and how they should apply themselves in the game, and give them enough rest. Obviously, dietitians, nutritionists, recovery, I mean, that's all in place for England. There is no better place to be than finding out what your recovery time should be, what you should eat, what you should drink, when you should rest, when you should have a massage, when you should go in the ice bath. You know, it's all there. When you should have your psychologist if you want to talk to him. It's all there for England. It's just not gelling at the moment. And the individuals need to take stock of their own game and really start performing. Harry Kane needs to get all the team together without Gareth and say, come on, lads, what are we doing?
Yeah, why without Gareth? Why would you say without Gareth, Sam?
It needs to be done privately between them, and say, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Do you really want to do? Because Gareth's doing all the tactics and picking the side of what to do. He needs to say, look, come on, let's get it together. What we're playing at. For some of them, it's the last chance. Probably for Harry, it's his last chance to win one.
Yeah.
I mean, Harry hasn't won anything in his career. So to try and win the Euros is bigger for him than anybody else.
Yes, but at the same time, are the tactics right? I mean, lots of people are saying they're playing far too defensively. How would you do it, Sam? What needs to be done? Because there's no flair. There's no attacking forward play, really. It's all passing backwards, being safe. They're doing high balls, but they're not winning them in the air.
Absolutely. I think that what we really face today, and England can look at the tactics and say they were very poor in possession of the ball. It really wasn't about that. It was really getting up and pressing Denmark in their own half. If they'd have gone and pressed Denmark from the very start and put them under pressure, in the reverse, Denmark showed how poor we were today because they did that. And we didn't do that. And because we didn't do that, that's why Denmark came out the better team today, looked the better team, had more shots at goal, and looked more likely to win this game than we did. So it's not all about what you do in possession, it's about what you do out of possession. And I could listen to Alan Shearer all day shouting, why don't we press? Why are we not pressing? Why are we not running in behind? Why are we not passing the ball forward? Exactly right. We all saw it today. Gareth will definitely, hopefully, see that when he looks at and reviews the game, shows the players and say this has to change.
Sam, looking forward to Slovenia then. I mean, would you start the same team? Who would you start? Anyone different? Would you have Harry Kane starting?
Fortunately for us, we're nearly through, and I think that you look at Slovenia and say, what are the weak points? And we focus on exploiting the weak points. In the reverse of that, we say, we are going to shut Slovenia down. We're not going to let the goalkeeper pass it out to his own players in his own 18-yard box. When they do, we're going to press them. And we're going to press them all over the pitch in their own half. And we're going to force them into mistakes to give us the opportunity to capitalise on that and go and try and create more and score goals. We haven't done that yet. We didn't do it today. And we couldn't break down Denmark because we didn't do it. So when we had to break Denmark down with 11 behind the ball in their own half, we simply couldn't do it today. So it's not a huge task in terms of knowing what we should be doing and what we shouldn't. It's pretty simple in football terms.
All right, Sam Allardyce, thank you very much indeed for your full-time analysis. It's much appreciated.
Well, I hope I'm speaking a lot more positive if you have me on after Slovakia, because I'm very, 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 well, disappointed today, to say the least.
All right, let's hope for a more upbeat conversation for the next match. Thank you very much indeed, Big Sam.
I hope so.
Thank you. Well, coming up next, we're going to be discussing this extraordinary story involving people who are advising Rishi Sunak having allegedly placed bets on the date of the election just hours in advance. It's a massive story, this, and indeed it sort of speaks to a degree of panic and chaos at the heart of the Tories' election campaign. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
Eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life. You know, we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, you know, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So yes, we need to help this age group so they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well, or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-saving things in the kitchen. You know, make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which are a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. You know, if you overget a milk as something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, there is an audience, there is obviously an appeal, there's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programs like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you know, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything, you don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Vote 2024 with me, Camilla Tominey. Let's get into the politics now, having done that football analysis, and talk about this extraordinary story. So the Tories' campaigning director has taken a leave of absence over this election betting scandal. Tory sources earlier confirmed that Tony Lee is taking a break after it emerged that he is being investigated over an alleged bet on the date of the general election. It came after it emerged that his wife, Laura Saunders, was facing an inquiry by the Gambling Commission. Here's what Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove had to say earlier today.
It is the case that obviously any decision by anyone to use inside information to bet on the election date, that is wrong, deeply regrettable, but I think the individuals concerned are now being investigated, and until that process is concluded, I think it's difficult for me to say more.
Meanwhile, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has called for the candidate's suspension.
This candidate should be suspended. And it's very telling that Rishi Sunak has not already done that. If it was one of my candidates, they'd be gone and their feet would not have touched the floor.
So analysis has shown that a flood of bets were placed on the July election date, the day before it was announced by Rishi Sunak. Bookmakers have produced data which has showed that almost all the wagers on a July poll, totalling thousands of pounds, were made in a few hours on May the 21st. At just after 5:15 the next day, Mr Sunak announced in the rain, you'll remember, the surprise summer election, having previously been widely expected to call a contest in the autumn. Well, joining me now to discuss this is former Labour MP Stephen Pound and The Times' chief political correspondent, Aubrey Allegretti. Chaps, Aubrey, this is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, we appreciate that nothing's been proved. These are all allegations. But just the look of it during what has been, let's be honest, a fairly difficult election campaign for the Tories, it's extraordinary. We've got Ian Duncan Smith, former Tory leader, talking about the fact that this is venal. I mean, it's dreadful, isn't it?
It's gone down very, very poorly. And like you say, it's really just a sort of terrible cherry on the top of a very otherwise difficult cake. You know, in terms of this election campaign, the Conservatives have really found themselves on the back foot time and time again. the mood in CCHQ this afternoon has just been absolutely toxic, and as if it couldn't get any worse.
Yeah, what
really
are you
does sound
hearing
like
from
that.
CCHQ? Because presumably they've all got tin hats on at the moment.
I mean, most people do acknowledge and realise just how bad things are, but I think the place was utterly silent after about 2 or 3 o'clock today. Half people sort of left, and I think most people just feel as though there's a sort of stench of death that's gripped the campaign. Now, obviously, this is an incident which nobody's suggesting Rishi Sunak, had any knowledge of, so it doesn't necessarily cast any aspersions on him. But again, it sort of drags this whiff of sleaze and scandal back over the Conservative Party, which they've worked so hard to shake off. Again, there's no sort of alleged criminality here. I think the problem is really just the optics and people thinking that people were treating this as too much of a game.
I mean, Stephen, should Rishi Sunak address all this?
Well, I think he has to.
Anything from him?
Yeah, he's got no choice. I thought Keir was, being the hard man here. I'm not entirely sure how you can suspend a candidate, but in all ways, this is like the end of the Roman Empire, the last days of Rome. I mean, this is what's annoying about this, and what really gets my goat is that this is so petty. This is somebody putting 50 quid or 500 quid on that, and it's so flipping obvious. If all these bets are going to suddenly flood on at one moment, do you honestly think that Paddy Power wouldn't have actually raised a red flag on this one? But I think the point Aubrey makes is a very good point. He's like the Mask of the Red Death in the Edgar Allan Poe story, when you got everybody is actually suddenly realising that they're doomed, and it becomes toxic, it becomes dangerous, and also it then feeds on itself. And I think that's worse than. I mean, I think quite clearly Rishi's got to say something. I don't want to hit a man when he's down, but he's had a pretty flipping awful campaign so far.
I mean, it's very, very difficult for those out on the doorstep, Aubrey. Other MPs or prospective MPs who have had nothing to do with this, who are probably frustrated with the way that Conservative Party HQ has been running this campaign. We hear now that money is being withdrawn from some of the marginal seats just to fight the safe seats. Just explain the thinking behind that.
So effectively, the strategy, if you like, about a year ago from CCHQ was that there would be 80 core defence targets where they would be primarily putting money and resources into trying to hold seats, and 20 targets that they were attacking, i.e. ones they wanted to flip and add to their significant majority already. There has been some delayed thinking, if you like, about re-adopting a different strategy in the light of the completely unshifting polls. Some Tory insiders have been looking at this for some time and saying, what are you doing? It's a complete waste of time to be, say, for example, trying to take 20 seats when that money could be used trying to shore up support in an additional 20 seats as well. And so CCHQ has moved belatedly into a damage limitation strategy. That's the situation we find ourselves in now. I think the issue is they are sort of reacting too slowly even to the level of damage that they need to. So instead of looking at seats where they might have a majority of, say, 5,000, they're now having to revert back to seats with a majority of 10,000, 15,000. Even reports of MPs in seats with 20,000 majorities being concerned. So I think this is all coming too little too late, but they have now realised the writing's on the wall.
Stephen, what do you think? Because the MRP polls are kind of forecasting Tory-geddon. We even had the poll yesterday that the Telegraph had with Savanta, which suggested that Rishi Sunak could lose his seat, and he's got an over 20,000 strong majority in Richmond. Do you believe this polling? Do you think these polls are going to narrow?
I think, well, they always do. They always do as you approach the election day. And I think the fact that Labour actually won the mayoral seat up there in North Yorkshire is interesting, and it's indicative, perhaps. But look, in some ways, what you wonder is what on earth are the Tories actually up to at the present time? Because there's no direction. You were doing a brilliant analysis with Allardyce earlier on about the lack of direction in the England midfield.
Where are the tactics here?
Well, exactly. You can't just keep lumping the ball up the field and hoping that somebody's going to get their head on the end of it. Look, it's embarrassing. And I think what's really interesting about this latest poll is the fact you're talking about 6 or 7 Reform MPs. And now, I mean, Nigel, actually, we can't mention the constituencies.
No, don't.
No, I wasn't going to.
Otherwise, we have to read out.
I know, you just kicked me under the table.
But generally, Reform, I mean, to be fair, there's some mixed polling on this as well, isn't there? We had Matt Goodwin yesterday came out with this extraordinary poll which seemed to suggest that Reform was well ahead of the Tories. I think it was 24 versus 15, and that looked like an outlier. But Reform have got some momentum right now.
Well, Camilla, imagine the scenario. After on the first day when Parliament reassembles, you've got a battered, bruised, nosebleeding rump of Tories staggering into the opposition benches, and in strolls Nigel Farage with a vision, with energy, with actually an image of the future. Do you honestly think that they're not going to coalesce around him? I always thought that the Tories, they are shapeshifters. They will always manage to adapt, and they're the most successful political party in Europe, whether they go to the centre, to the right, to the centre-right. But is this really the end of the peer show for them? Will they really have to accept the fact that they simply no longer have a brand that appeals to the British people, particularly when a charismatic figure like Nigel Farage is there saying, follow me, I'm your new leader?
I mean, Aubrey, it depends who's left, doesn't it? I mean,
Tom Tugendhat is about it,
well,
I think,
well, to be
isn't
fair,
it?
I think Kemi Badenoch is left, even in the most sort of catastrophic polling scenario. Isn't it the case, though, that Starmer hasn't had a brilliant campaign? It's just that the Conservatives have had a much, much, much worse one.
I mean,
is that fair?
There's a sort of running joke that Keir Starmer has a genie that he keeps asking for wishes,
yeah,
and the genie just keeps granting them over and over and over again.
In that mean vase.
Rishi Sunak's sort of luck has just seemed to have run out. And obviously there have been some complete false missteps. I think there's a complete mismatch between the number 10 team around Rishi Sunak, who've been in charge of his brand and the government strategy, and the team in CCHQ, the national campaign strategy. They just do not seem to have been on the same page ever since this election was called. They obviously had a very successful time launching the manifesto. They got a lot of policies that they wanted to talk about in the weeks before. So a lot of the airtime was being spent discussing some of the Conservative policies. National service, for example, did take up a lot of time. People got really interested in it. But basically what we've seen is the country has stopped listening.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter what you're saying. It doesn't matter who you're attacking or criticising. Most voters have just switched off.
All right. Stephen Pound, Aubrey Allegretti, thank you very much for joining me this evening. Well, coming up next, we're going to be asking the politicians what they think. It's another debate tonight, which we'll be covering across the evening on GB News, but we're going to be speaking to Kevin Hollingrake and Jonathan Ashworth. Stay tuned.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office on GB News. Most places will have a fine start tomorrow. Plenty of sunshine, but a change on the way in the west as things start to cloud over with outbreaks of rain, courtesy of a couple of weather systems and a couple of areas of low pressure, pushing away the high pressure that's brought most of us a fine day today. Still very pleasant out there this evening. The main exception to that being Western Scotland, as the rain is trickling in here. Some of that rain could turn a bit heavy as we go through the night. But for most, it's a dry night. Clear skies will allow a little bit of mist and fog to form and turn quite chilly over parts of eastern England, down to single figures for parts of East Anglia and the southeast, certainly in the countryside. So a coolish start here, but any mist and fog will soon disappear, and then generally it's going to be another fine day across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. Plenty of sunshine, soon starting to lift the temperatures, but a cloudier day for Wales and southwest England. Quite a cloudy start for Northern Ireland with some outbreaks of rain here, and it's a bit of a damp start in western Scotland as well. Much of northern England, much of eastern Scotland dry and fine, but a lot of cloud and some outbreaks of rain and drizzle over the Northern Isles too. It's further west though, where we've got this weather front moving in, bringing more in the way of persistent rain. That'll cloud things over across all of Northern Ireland by lunchtime, and patchy rain edging in here through the afternoon. Further rain to come at times across western Scotland. A few showers developing across Wales and southwest England too. Still some brightness possible here, but definitely the brightest, sunniest weather over central and eastern parts, and the warmest weather as well, 23, 24, whereas in the west it will feel a bit cooler than today because of the cloud and the rain. Leaving some showers around during Saturday over parts of eastern England. Another weather front coming into the northwest, but between, again, many places set fair on Saturday, a brighter day for Wales, and as we go through the weekend into the early part of next week in particular, it is going to get quite a bit warmer.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Vote 2024, The People Decide with me, Camilla Tominey. Another night, another TV debate, and this time it's in York. And Olivia Utley, our GB News political correspondent, is there. Olivia?
Hello, yes, I'm here, and it is all hotting up in the BBC Question Time spin room tonight. We've all stopped watching the football, it's over, and everyone's focusing on the job at hand. We're expecting to hear from all four of the leaders of the main parties, one by one. They're not all going to be in a room at the same time. It's going to be each of them facing questions from a BBC audience. Both major parties are looking pretty nervous this evening. This is likely to be the biggest grilling that either of them get from the actual voters who they will be facing in the polls on July the 4th. I'm here now with Kevin Hollingrake, the Conservative candidate. Kevin, we've heard quite a lot from Rishi Sunak that he isn't ready to suspend. I mean, these candidates who bet on the general election, he isn't going to suspend them, it seems. He's going to be asked about that tonight. What's the answer to why he hasn't suspended them?
Well, an investigation is taking place by the Gambling Commission, quite rightly. These are serious allegations. If they are true, it's of course appalling and wrong. But an investigation should take place, due process should be followed, and we'll know the results of that investigation, and then it can take action accordingly.
The Conservatives have said time and time again that the Labour Party would add 2k to their average family's tax bill. I mean, that figure has been proven to be pretty dubious. It's very, very crudely calculated. Can we expect to hear that bandied around again tonight? And is that really responsible?
Well, it's not. It's simply calculated. There's £39 billion of unfunded spending pledges, and there's 20 million households, roughly, working households in the country. One divided by the other is £2,000. Now, they might choose to levy those taxes in a completely different way, but there's an assumption there. But nevertheless, the bill's right, the total's right. You can see it on my Twitter feed if people want to see how it's made up. So those things are true, and it means you've got a clear choice. You are definitely going to pay more tax under a Labour government, or you can pay less tax under a Conservative government. We've committed to lowering people's taxes. We've already started doing that. People on average earnings in this country now pay less tax as a proportion of their income than they've ever done at any time over the last 50 years. That's the kind of party we are. That's the choice people have. Lower taxes and lower migration under a Conservative government, or higher taxes and higher migration under Keir Starmer.
But I mean, the taxes wouldn't be levied in that way at all. Keir Starmer has said over and over again that the three main taxes for working people won't rise. And also, the Labour Party has been throwing this claim at the Conservatives that mortgages would rise by £4,800 under a Conservative government. Would you say that claim is as accurate as yours?
It's complete nonsense. I've read how they've made that figure up. It's complete nonsense. What we've made a commitment to people is, over time, when we can afford it, is to completely abolish national insurance, because we want to cut taxes. We've already done that. We've halved national insurance with our latest pledge, which means the average person would pay £1,350 less tax. That's our commitment. What Labour's doing is saying you're doing that all at once. We're not doing all at once. Gradually, over time, that's our aspiration. So it's a completely false figure. So I think it's important we do look at the right figures, but those figures are clear. That Labour would increase taxes. You say they won't increase VAT or income tax. There are lots of other taxes they may increase. Council tax, of course. They may put council tax up. They may put VAT on different things. All those things they may do. Fuel duty, of course, which is really important to lots of people around this country. We've frozen fuel duty for the last 14 years. So all these things are at their disposal. I don't meet many people on the doorstep who seriously would argue with the fact that Labour will increase taxes in office when their spending plans are really revealed. And Wes Streeting said it this weekend. What's in the manifesto is not the sum total of their spending pledges. But what they want to know in my constituency when I go there is, where's the money coming from?
But I mean, you say that the Conservatives are planning to cut national insurance down to nothing. Jeremy Hunt has now cut national insurance in 2 consecutive statements, and it has done absolutely nothing to help the Conservatives in the polls. In fact, the latest polls out 2 days ago showed the complete decimation of the Conservative Party. For you, what would a good night look like for the Conservatives on July the 4th? How many seats do you realistically think the party's going to win?
A good night is we win. That's what we're aiming for. A victory is always possible if you refuse to give up fighting. So that's what we've got to do. We've got to keep fighting on the doorstep. I've got to say, I don't see any appetite for Keir Starmer on the doorstep. Even the Labour supporters don't seem very keen on him. Where we're losing ground, and we need to make the argument, is people who think it might choose to vote reform. That's where people are sometimes tempted by. So, and we've got to say to those people, if you vote reform, you're much more likely to get Keir Starmer. Reform cannot form a government. They can't even form an effective opposition. They'd have a couple of seats at the most, but you'll see a landslide for Labour, and that will be so damaging for this country. The next 5 years will be so damaging for this country under Labour government. Higher taxes, higher migration. That is not what people who are thinking of voting Conservative want, and not what people are thinking of voting Reform want.
I mean, you say you're still planning to win the general election. If I were a betting woman like one of your candidates, I would get very, very good odds on the Conservatives winning the general election. I think it's 1 in 66 or something at the moment. You have a majority of 25,000. In normal times, that would be a very, very safe seat indeed. How confident are you feeling?
Well, we're not complacent. We're working very hard in our seat. There's no doubt about it. But the feedback on the ground is good. There are some people that are undecided. Of course, some people are annoyed at us with some of the things that have gone on, and we should apologise for the mistakes we have made. But most people recognise what we have done, whether it be improving reading standards in our schools, the best readers now in the Western world are young children, whether it's cutting crime, 50% reduction in violent crime on our streets, 100,000 more doctors and nurses in the NHS, controlled inflation, 11% now to 2%, help people through the COVID crisis, the cost of living crisis, and now got the economy growing again. People do recognise there have been some successes, and those successes will continue under Conservative government, would all be completely obliterated under a Labour government.
Still talking about a Conservative government. Well, thank you very much, Kevin Hollingworth. Very good to hear from you, and I look forward to catching up later after the debates. Thank you. Well, that was Kevin Hollingworth, still churning out those party lines. He does sound pretty confident about winning his own seat, as you would hope with a majority of 25,000. But the very fact that he seems to be campaigning pretty hard just shows how badly the Conservatives are doing. It is very, very tough for Conservative candidates to be out here tonight defending the party, defending the leader of that party. It's going to be a tough evening for the Tories. I am now here already with Jonathan Ashworth, the Labour Shadow Cabinet member. Obviously, this is a much easier campaign for the Labour Party, but it is looking now, I mean, this talk of a supermajority. How are you feeling about that? Because I suspect that there are going to be Labour voters in comfortable Labour seats who needn't bother voting. Why should they?
Well, let's just settle down, calm down a little bit. The poll that matters is election day. I don't believe any of these wild opinion polls. And I would say to your viewers on GB News tonight that if you want change after 14 years of failure and decline under the Conservatives, if you want to bring an end to this chaos, you've got to go out and vote for it on the 4th of July. That's the only poll that matters. That's what we are focused on. That's why we're working very hard to win the trust of the British people. There's lots of people still to make up their mind. And tonight, Keir's going to be talking about his plans for the economy, plans to create good, well-paid jobs, his plans to fix the NHS, his plans to bring order to the borders. But we're focused on election day, not all these opinion polls.
You heard what Kevin Hollingworth said just there about Labour's plan for tax rises. I mean, isn't he right? There are so many expensive commitments there. And yes, Keir Starmer said that he won't be raising any of the 3 main taxes on working people. But the truth is, some taxes are going to have to rise under Labour, aren't they?
I mean, Kevin Hollingworth's got a brass neck. The Tory party have put forward a manifesto, which is a long, desperate wish list of billions of pounds worth of unfunded commitments when the money is not there. In fact, Jeremy Hunt, in his own constituency, a few days ago admitted that the welfare savings have already been spent. The Tory manifesto can only be funded by going on a borrowing bonanza, just like Liz Truss, putting up mortgages by around £4,800. So I wouldn't take any notice of the nonsense Kevin Hollinrake is coming out with. I'd be more interested to know whether he's been down the bookies to put a bet on an election and who these Tories are who knew what was going on. I made a joke about it, but it's actually really serious. You know, this is insider trading. It's an absolute scandal. And in the same way that the Tories, sold PPE to their mates, partied in lockdown, it's one rule for them and another for the rest of us.
So can you absolutely promise that all of the Labour candidates are squeaky clean and nothing's going to come out about them in the 2.5 weeks before this general election?
Well, look, I mean, the issue here is if you knew the election date because you were one of Rishi Sunak's cabinet ministers or one of his members of staff, if you knew about the election date and then you went and put a bet on at the bookies or online, that's the scandal. It's not guessing. If you knew, that's insider trading. It's really, really serious. Rishi Sunak should suspend the candidates who have been caught already, and he should come clean and tell us who knew and whether any of his politicians, any of his ministers, any of his senior aides have also put bets on in the knowledge of when the date was going to be.
Just one final question about tax. It very much sounds, and Keir Starmer is evading the question, but it does very much sound as though at least one of fuel tax or capital gains tax or inheritance tax is going to rise. Which of those would you most like to see rise?
It doesn't sound like that at all, because we've been very clear. No increase in income tax, VAT, national insurance or corporation tax.
What about inheritance tax, capital gains tax, council tax?
But there is nothing in our manifesto that needs increases in taxation. We've been clear on that. All of our sums add up. It's the Tories who have made billions of pounds worth of commitments, from commitments they cannot fund, from savings they cannot find. The money is not there for Tory commitments.
So you're ruling out tax rises in the next
We have been clear on where we stand on tax. No increase in income tax, national insurance, VAT and corporation tax. Nothing in our manifesto requires additional tax rises.
So no tax rise in the next Parliament?
Nothing in our manifesto requires additional tax.
Not quite answering my question, but nearly there. Thank you very much, Jonathan
What did Kevin
Ashworth.
say when you asked him about tax rises?
Well, I was asking him about what's going on with his candidates, which I think is very interesting.
Well, if you get him back on later, ask him about this, because they put up tax 25 times, didn't they, the Tories? So ask Kevin about
I
their
will
tax
very
rises.
much be asking the Conservatives about their plans for tax too. Thank you very much, Jonathan Ashworth. Very good to see you. So Jonathan Ashworth there sounding a little bit more confident, but still we haven't got a clear answer on what is going to happen with taxes under a Labour government. We know there's not going to be a rise in income tax, VAT or national insurance. I'm bored of saying it, but there are a lot of other taxes too. And it sounds, Jonathan Ashworth wasn't saying it there, but if you read between the lines, they will not rule out rises in any of those taxes. Let's see if we get any more clarity on that issue in that debate starting at 8 o'clock this evening.
Olivia, great job, and I know you'll be reporting on the debate throughout the night on GB News. Thank you very much indeed. Well, coming up next, you won't want to miss this, because I'm going to be speaking to a Just Stop Oil protester after protesters broke into Stansted Airport, you can see that now, and sprayed private jets with orange paint. I'm going to be asking a campaigner for the group what on earth they think they're playing at. Genuinely, stay tuned.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Today we've got two fantastic individuals who have invented a teddy bear to help children who are suffering with mental health.
Yes, so Lynn and Samantha Crilly came up with the idea for the Trouble Muncher toy following Samantha's own battle with an eating disorder and OCD.
Yes, the teddy comes with a notepad and encourages its owners to write down what's troubling them, and then they can pop the note into the rucksack on the bear's back.
I struggled with mental health most of my life, actually, and oh no, it's fine. I've got one. I feel quite sorry for you. But and one thing I always did was message my mum, and it was a thought disassociation kind of technique. I would message you even now, I message you thoughts that come into my mind, but massively when I was younger. And I thought, what happens if you're younger and you don't have this?
Yeah, and I think in today's technology-fueled world, I think we go back to basics, and it just helps them to process by writing it down. Everything's so instant these days.
So it's like an indirect way of telling your parents how you're feeling, what you're going through. Such a great idea. What's the feedback been from parents who have got a trouble muncher for their kids? What you've got any stories?
It's been really good. In one household, he sits on the kitchen side, and I think during the day, the parents, the children put their worries in or at night, and then they know that their parents will look at it during the day. And it's gone into some schools as well.
You'd imagine you'd want one of these trouble munchers in every classroom and in every school up and down the country, because children who are being bullied, for example, who feel like they can't tell their parents, they're too embarrassed to talk about it. This is such an important tool, isn't it, for children to communicate that?
Yeah, well, you were saying Mum's a mental health counsellor, and you had a young child who had Snapchat AI. So you talk to an AI in Snapchat, and that's what they talk to now.
The People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Vote 2024 with me, Camilla Tominey. Well, we've had tomato soup thrown over Van Gogh's sunflowers painting at the National Gallery. We've had major sporting events, including Wimbledon, the second Ashes Test, and indeed the World Snooker Championships turned orange at Sheffield. We've had a damaging of the case around the Magna Carta at the British Library, Stonehenge sprayed with orange powder, and now a break-in at Stansted Airport and orange paint sprayed on what protesters thought was Taylor Swift's jet. It wasn't actually her jet at all, it was somebody else's. Let's discuss this with Just Stop Oil's Adrian Johnson. Adrian, can I begin by asking what on earth you're playing at?
Camilla, thank you so much for having me on your programme. Camilla, let us just remind ourselves, please, what's going on, OK? We have 1 in 7 people in the United States under a heat dome right now. We've literally had 12 months of unbroken heating that smashed through the safety guardrail of 1.5 degrees of heating. We've got thousands of pilgrims making the Hajj pilgrim and dying from heat. We've got people going for walks in Greece and not coming back. These are not ordinary times.
Why does that justify criminal damage?
That justifies a response, and so we are calling upon.
Why does it justify criminal damage? Why does it justify you breaking into an airport, which is a massive security breach?
Okay, I would put it to you, Camilla, and I would put it to your listeners and your viewers that the massive security breach is from our own government pursuing policies that are leading to mass death and suffering.
No, the security breach was the 2 protesters who broke into Stansted Airport. Literally with pliers. So I don't understand why you think that this protest justifies criminal behaviour.
Because this is what we need to do to take action against our government.
No, you don't.
And we're calling upon it.
You're losing the argument, because what's happening is no one's talking about the cause anymore. People are just talking about how annoying Just Stop Oil are and how you've crossed the Rubicon from peaceful and acceptable protest to criminal damage. So no one's talking about the climate. They're absolutely fed up of you. So you're getting the publicity, but no one's talking about what you really want them to talk about, which is the climate emergency. They're just thinking to themselves, why don't Just Stop Oil just stop?
Well, Camilla, with respect, people have been talking about the climate over the last 24 hours because of the action that we've taken. And also you made a really interesting point there about crossing a Rubicon. And I put it to you that the line that we are not going to cross, and we will never cross this, is that line of taking violent action. We believe and we fully support non-violent action. Now, that does include criminal action, but that falls under the banner of civil disobedience. And civil disobedience is actually recognized by international law as being an important and necessary part of a healthy and functioning democracy. That's why we take this form of action.
OK, but what has Stonehenge, for instance, and the people that work there done to deserve this? I mean, one imagines that the type of people that gather at Stonehenge for the summer solstice are the types of people who probably are quite proud of the amount of recycling they do. So what on earth are you doing attacking Stonehenge? Rishi Sunak said it was absolutely disgraceful. Keir Starmer agreed. The vast majority of people in this country look at that action and think it's utterly pathetic and self-defeating.
But Camilla, you know, when we look at Stonehenge, we see a beautiful monument, and it's a celebration of 5,000 years of human achievement and 5,000 years of civilization that has flourished because we have had, up until this point, a stable climate. And we've been able to predict and rely on it to give us the food that we need to eat. And Camilla, that 5,000 years is about to be obliterated unless we take action. And so we're calling on our government.
Is there any reason why you don't take your protests to the Chinese embassy, who are continuing to build power stations and are responsible for a vast majority of the world's carbon emissions, certainly dwarfing those produced by the UK?
That's a really good point and a really good question.
So will you protest there next?
I'm not sure what our plans are next, to be perfectly honest, but it's a good point. But China, to be clear, their emissions per person are exactly the same as the emissions per person in the United Kingdom. And that's for a nation that makes most of the stuff that we buy and import.
All right. Adrian Johnson, I think we're going to have to disagree agreeably, but thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. We've run out of time. OK, thank you. Tom Harwood, briefly, what have you got coming up on State of the Nation?
Well, we're going to be joined by the one and only Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we're going to talk about... He is. And he's been much missed from this time.
Of course he has.
We're going to be talking about this extraordinary Supreme Court decision to stop extra oil and gas drilling unless there's been taken into account whatever happens with that oil and gas far, far, far down the line. The industry didn't expect it. It's been used by activists to try and stop extra drilling. We're going to be diving deep into that. Also, the Labour Party want to end the gender pay gap. We've got some data to suggest perhaps the gender pay gap isn't all that it looks like. And, of course, also, we'll be talking about a new duty that the Labour Party want to place on councils. Tune in to see what it is.
Oh, very good indeed, Tom Harwood, and we look forward to hearing from Jacob Rees-Mogg again. We've been missing him on this show. I'll be back on Sunday, but first, here's the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office on GB News. Most places will have a fine start tomorrow. Plenty of sunshine, but a change on the way in the west as things start to cloud over with outbreaks of rain, courtesy of a couple of weather systems and a couple of areas of low pressure, pushing away the high pressure that's brought most of us a fine day today. Still very pleasant out there this evening. The main exception to that being Western Scotland, as the rain is trickling in here. Some of that rain could turn a bit heavy as we go through the night. But for most, it's a dry night. Clear skies will allow a little bit of mist and fog to form and turn quite chilly over parts of eastern England, down to single figures for parts of East Anglia and the southeast, certainly in the countryside. So a coolish start here, but any mist and fog will soon disappear, and then generally it's going to be another fine day across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. Plenty of sunshine, soon starting to lift the temperatures, but a cloudier day for Wales and southwest England. Quite a cloudy start for Northern Ireland with some outbreaks of rain here, and it's a bit of a damp start in western Scotland as well. Much of northern England, much of eastern Scotland dry and fine, but a lot of cloud and some outbreaks of rain and drizzle over the Northern Isles too. It's further west though, where we've got this weather front moving in, bringing more in the way of persistent rain. That'll cloud things over across all of Northern Ireland by lunchtime, and patchy rain edging in here through the afternoon. Further rain to come at times across western Scotland. A few showers developing across Wales and southwest England too. Still some brightness possible here, but definitely the brightest, sunniest weather over central and eastern parts, and the warmest weather as well, 23, 24, whereas in the west it will feel a bit cooler than today because of the cloud and the rain. Leaving some showers around around during Saturday over parts of eastern England. Another weather front coming into the northwest. But between, again, many places set fair on Saturday, a brighter day for Wales. And as we go through the weekend into the early part of next week in particular, it is going to get quite a bit warmer.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still time to win our Summer Spectacular with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or GB